My dying mother needed a new heart, and I, a man of power and wealth, believed I could simply buy it. Instead, my arrogance led me to insult the very nurse who held the sole authority to grant her one. The smell of antiseptic and quiet desperation clung to everything in the Sterling Cross Memorial Hospital. It was a smell I'd become intimately familiar with over the past 72 hours. I sat in a stiff, uncomfortable chair, my eyes glued to the rhythmic rise and fall of my mother's chest. Her name was Eleanor, and she was the only anchor I had left in this world. A rare cardiac condition was trying to steal her from me, and I was paying a small fortune for the best doctors in the state, in the best private suite this hospital offered, to make sure that didn't happen. I ran a hand through my already disheveled hair, the fabric of my $1,000 suit feeling like sandpaper against my skin. I hadn't been home. I hadn't slept. I'd just been here, watching, waiting, and growing more agitated with every beep of the machines that surrounded her. I'm a litigator. Control is my currency. And in this place, I had none. All I could do was watch the staff, scrutinizing their every move, looking for any hint of incompetence. That's when she walked in. She was a black woman, older, maybe in her late 50s, with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her white uniform was immaculate, her posture exuding a calm that grated on my frayed nerves. She didn't bustle in like the other nurses. She moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, her eyes taking in the room, the machines, and finally, my mother, with a focused intensity. She checked the chart at the foot of the bed, her expression unreadable. Then her gaze fell on the IV drip. I had been staring at it for the last hour, convinced it was dripping too slowly. I'd read a dozen articles online. I knew the standard rate for this medication. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She turned to me, her eyebrows raised slightly. "Yes, sir." "That drip," I said, pointing a rigid finger. "It's too slow. The literature says it should be administered at a rate of at least 100 millimoles per hour. That's barely moving." She gave the IV bag a brief professional glance before returning her eyes to me. "Sir, Dr. Evans has your mother on a very specific titrated dose. Her blood pressure is delicate. We're increasing it incrementally. The rate is set exactly as prescribed." Her placid tone felt like a personal insult. It was dismissive, condescending, as if I were some hysterical family member who didn't understand the complexities of the situation. "I'm not just some family member," I snapped, standing up to my full height. "I'm the one paying for this suite, for Dr. Evans, and for you, and I want that drip rate checked and adjusted. Now." A flicker of something annoyance, pity, crossed her face before it was smoothed over again into a mask of professional neutrality. "I understand your concern, sir, but I cannot and will not alter a direct order from the chief of cardiology. It would be dangerous for your mother." The word dangerous lit a fuse inside me. How dare she imply I would do anything to harm my own mother? She was the one being negligent. Dangerous is letting her condition worsen because of your incompetence. Is this your first day in the cardiac wing? Maybe you're more suited to changing bedpans somewhere else. I want your name, and I want to speak to your supervisor." She stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. It was infuriating. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't even flustered. "My name is Grace," she said, her voice still infuriatingly level. "And the nursing supervisor is in a critical staff meeting. I can assure you, Mr. Davies, your mother is receiving the best possible care." She knew my name. Of course it was on the chart. But the way she said it felt like she was looking right through me, through the expensive suit and the aggressive posture, to the terrified son underneath. I hated it. "The best possible care? Don't make me laugh," I scoffed, taking a step closer. "I have half a mind to report you to the state board. I will have your license pulled. You will not work in this city again." The threat hung in the air, heavy and ugly. It was an empty one probably, but it was all I had. It was my last-ditch effort to reclaim some semblance of control. For the first time, her calm facade seemed to crack. Not with fear, but with something else. Something that looked almost like disappointment. Before she could respond, the door swung open and Dr. Evans himself walked in, a clipboard in his hand. He was the top cardiac surgeon on the East Coast. A man whose time was measured in thousands of dollars per minute. "Ah, Mark," he said, his eyes on the monitors. "Her pressure is stabilizing nicely." He then noticed the tableau-me, red-faced and trembling with rage, standing over the nurse. His smile vanished. A look of pure, unadulterated horror washed over his face. "Mr. Davies, what are you doing?" he stammered, his eyes darting from me to the nurse and back again. "Doctor, thank God," I said, feeling a surge of vindication. "This nurse is refusing to follow basic protocols. She's being insubordinate, and she's endangering my mother." Dr. Evans looked like he'd just seen a ghost. He completely ignored my complaint. He rushed forward, but not towards my mother's bed. He rushed towards Grace. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, his voice laced with a panicked deference I had never heard from the confident surgeon. "I am so sorry. Please forgive this. I had no idea you were on the floor tonight. Is there anything I can do?" I froze. Holloway. The name echoed in my mind, hitting me like a physical blow. I'd heard that name before. I'd seen it. Every day. On the drive-in, on the stationery, on the marble wall, in the grand lobby. The Sterling Cross Memorial Hospital. At the Eleanor Holloway wing. The name of the hospital's primary benefactor. The name on the side of the entire building. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, as if the machines were sucking all the oxygen out. Holloway. The name was carved in granite in the lobby, a testament to a donation so large it had built the entire state-of-the-art cardiac center I was currently standing in. I stared at the nurse, at Mrs. Holloway, and my mind reeled, frantically trying to reconcile the image of this quiet, unassuming woman with the philanthropic titan, whose name was synonymous with medical excellence in this city. My threats about her license, about changing bedpans, they didn't just sound empty now, they sounded profane. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice a pathetic croak. Dr. Evans shot me a look of pure fury, a look that said, "Shut up before you make this infinitely worse." He turned back to Mrs. Holloway, his posture practically a bow. "Ma'am, I am mortified. Mr. Davies is under a great deal of stress. His mother's condition is severe. It's no excuse, of course, absolutely no excuse." Mrs. Holloway raised a hand, and the doctor's frantic apology died in his throat. The authority in that simple gesture was absolute. She looked at me, and for the first time her professional mask slipped away completely. It wasn't replaced with anger or vindictiveness. It was replaced with a profound, weary sadness that was somehow 1,000 times more damning. "It's quite all right, Dr. Evans," she said, her voice retaining its calm cadence. "Mr. Davies was concerned about the IV drip. He was advocating for his mother. His methods were unfortunate." The word unfortunate landed like a hammer blow. It was the kind of word you use to describe a terminal diagnosis. She then turned her full attention back to me. "Mr. Davies, my late husband Charles, and I funded this wing on one condition, that every patient who comes through those doors receives the same level of dignity and expert care, regardless of their ability to pay for a private suite. I still take a few nursing shifts a month. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me of why we built this place for the patients, not for the egos of their families." Every word was a precise surgical cut, excising my pride and leaving my shame exposed and raw. I opened my mouth to apologize, to explain, to say anything that might undo the last 10 minutes, but no sound came out. What could I possibly say? "I'm sorry I threatened the woman who owns the ground I'm standing on. I'm sorry I mistook your quiet competence for incompetence because of my own arrogance and prejudice." "Dr. Evans," she said, turning away from me as if I were a piece of furniture, "let's talk about Mrs. Davies' actual condition. The diuretic is stabilizing her fluid levels, but her ejection fraction is still dangerously low. The inotropes are a temporary solution at best." She wasn't reading from the chart. She was reciting my mother's critical stats from memory, her analysis sharper and more concise than anything I'd heard from the team of specialists I was paying. She walked over to the monitors, her eyes scanning the complex waveforms with an expert's ease. I, the high-powered litigator who thought he'd mastered the situation by reading a few WebMD articles, felt like a child in the presence of true authority. "Leave us, please, doctor," she said softly, not taking her eyes off the screen. Dr. Evans looked at me, then back at her, a silent question in his eyes. "He can stay," she clarified, finally glancing at me. "Mr. Davies and I have more to discuss." The doctor nodded quickly and practically fled the room, closing the door softly behind him. The silence that descended was deafening, broken only by the steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. It was just me, my dying mother, and the most powerful woman in the entire healthcare system of the state, a woman I had just threatened to ruin. She continued to study the monitors for a long moment. "You love your mother very much," she said. It wasn't a question. "She's all I have," I whispered, the fight completely gone from me. "I know," she said. "I've read her file. Extensively." She finally turned to face me, her dark eyes holding mine. They were clear, compassionate, and held the weight of 1,000 similar vigils. "I know that her condition is degenerative. I know that Dr. Evans and his team are doing everything they can to manage her symptoms, but that management is all it is. There is no medication that can reverse the damage to her heart." A cold dread, colder than any I'd felt before, crept up my spine. "What are you saying?" Her expression was grim. She walked past me, stopping at the foot of my mother's bed and placing a gentle hand on her ankle over the thin blanket. Her gaze was soft, filled with a nurse's empathy, but her next words were delivered with the unsparing clarity of a benefactor who held the keys to the kingdom. "I'm saying your mother needs a new heart, Mr. Davies. A transplant is her only real chance at survival. And as the founder of this wing and the head of the Transplant Acquisitions Board, I am the one who makes the final decision on whose name gets moved to the top of that list." The words hung in the sterile air, heavier than any legal verdict I had ever heard. The top of the list. It was the holy grail, the impossible dream for the thousands of desperate people waiting for a second chance at life. And she, the woman I had just insulted with every ounce of my privileged arrogance, held the pen that could write my mother's name there. My entire world, which I had so carefully constructed with money, power, and intimidation, had just shrunk to the space between me and this woman. My mother's life was no longer in the hands of the high-priced specialists or the advanced machines. It rested entirely on the goodwill of the person I had tried to humiliate. I swallowed, my throat suddenly as dry as dust. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted with the force of a tectonic plate. I was no longer the client demanding service. I was a beggar. "Mrs. Holloway," I started, my voice barely a whisper. I am so profoundly sorry. My behavior was inexcusable. There are no words to express how ashamed I am." She listened, her expression unchanging. She didn't offer a comforting word or a gesture of forgiveness. She simply allowed my apology to hang there, unaccepted, forcing me to feel its full weight. "Shame is a powerful motivator, Mr. Davies," she said finally, her voice still quiet, but now with a sharp, clinical edge. "But it doesn't save lives. Resources do. Decisions do. Tell me, if our roles were reversed, if I was some anonymous nurse and you held this power, would you grant my mother a heart after I had spoken to you the way you spoke to me?" The question was a trap, and we both knew it. If I said yes, I was a liar. If I said no, I was a monster. The truth was, my former self, the man I was 20 minutes ago, would have relished the opportunity to deny her. He would have seen it as justice. The thought made my stomach churn with self-loathing. I'd like to think I would, I managed to say, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Would you," she asked, her gaze piercing, "or would you have your secretary send a boilerplate rejection letter? You see, Mr. Davies, the list is long. The need is overwhelming. For every person who gets a heart, 10 others die waiting. The decisions are agonizing. We look at medical compatibility, prognosis, support systems, but we also look at character. Not just of the patient, but of the family who will be responsible for their recovery. A transplanted heart is a precious, sacred gift. We don't give it to people who will squander it. We don't give it to families who see doctors and nurses as the hired help." She took a step closer to me, her voice dropping lower. "You stormed in here. bristling with aggression, treating the very people trying to save your mother's life as obstacles. You didn't ask questions, you made accusations. You didn't seek understanding, you demanded compliance. You threatened my livelihood, my very identity as a caregiver, over an IV drip rate you learned about on the internet. Her indictment was so precise, so devastatingly accurate, that I had no defense. I could only stand there and take it, the truth of her words stripping me bare. I was scared, I confessed, the admission raw and vulnerable. She's my mom. I felt so helpless. We are all helpless sometimes, Mr. Davies, she replied, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. I sat in a chair just like that one for 3 weeks while my Charles was dying. I know what it feels like to want to rage at the world. But you didn't rage at the world. You raged at a black woman who you assumed was beneath you. You saw my skin and my uniform, and you made a judgment. That judgment is what concerns me. The accusation of racism landed with a brutal finality. I wanted to deny it, to protest that it wasn't about her race, but about my stress. But was that true? Would I have been so quick to threaten, so dismissive of the authority of a white male nurse of the same age? I honestly didn't know, and that uncertainty was perhaps the most damning thing of all. She walked over to the small desk in the corner of the room and picked up a manila folder I hadn't noticed before. It was thick, heavy with paperwork. She held it out to me. "This is your mother's complete file," she said. "Everything, including the transplant board's preliminary assessment. They flagged her for denial. Dr. Evans fought for her, but the board's initial ruling was unfavorable." My blood ran cold. Denied? We hadn't even officially applied. Why? Her health insurance is the best money can buy. I can pay for everything out of pocket if I have to. "This isn't about money, Mr. Davies," Mrs. Holloway said, her eyes locking onto mine. "The denial was flagged because of you. The psychological evaluation of the primary caregiver, its standard procedure. The report described you as overbearing, hostile, and a potential compliance risk for post-operative care. They were concerned you would bully your mother or the home care nurses into not following the strict recovery regimen. They were concerned you were a liability." I took the file from her hands, my own trembling. I was the reason. My need for control, my arrogance. It had nearly cost my mother her only chance before it had even begun. I was the liability. "I can change," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "I will do whatever you say. I'll go to therapy. I'll take classes, anything, please. Don't let her die because of me." Mrs. Holloway watched me, her expression unreadable. For a long, agonizing moment, she said nothing. Then she took a deep breath. "A heart has just become available. A perfect match. A young man in a tragic accident just a few hours ago. The procurement team is on standby." A surge of hope, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. "A match? Now?" "Yes," she said. "But there's another patient who is also a perfect match. A young schoolteacher with 2 children. She's been on the list for 2 years. Medically, they are both equally viable candidates. It is my sole decision to determine which of them gets it. I have to make the call in the next 30 minutes. 30 minutes. My mother's life and the life of a young schoolteacher boiled down to the next 30 minutes and a decision made by the woman standing before me. The woman I had verbally assaulted. The scale of my foolishness was crushing. I had spent my entire adult life believing I could litigate, argue, and buy my way through any problem. Now I was faced with a situation where my only currency was humility, and I was bankrupt. What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice hollow. I was prepared for anything. A public apology, a massive donation, some degrading task to prove my desperation. I would do it. For my mother, I would do anything. Mrs. Holloway looked from me to my mother, her face etched with the impossible weight of her choice. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Davies," she said softly. "I want something for you, and for your mother." She pulled the stiff visitor's chair away from the wall and placed it next to my mother's bed, opposite from where I had been sitting. She patted the back of it. "Sit." I obeyed without question, sinking into the chair. It felt different on this side, closer, more intimate. She didn't sit herself. Instead, she walked to the window, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the encroaching twilight. "My Charles," she began, her voice distant, "was a builder, not an architect, not an engineer. A builder. He laid bricks with his own 2 hands. When he started his company, he was the first on the job site and the last to leave. He used to say that you can't build a strong building on a weak foundation. It doesn't matter how beautiful the design is or how expensive the materials are. If the foundation is cracked, it will crumble." She turned from the window to look at me. "Love is a foundation, Mr. Davies. But fear and control, they create cracks. You love your mother, I have no doubt. But your love is so intertwined with fear, fear of losing her, fear of being helpless, that it's become brittle. You tried to build walls around her with your money and your aggression, but you were just cracking the foundation." Tears welled in my eyes, hot and shameful. She was right. I had been so focused on fighting the disease, I hadn't realized I was fighting everyone who was trying to help. "The teacher," Mrs. Holloway continued, "has a foundation of community. Her school has held fundraisers. Her neighbors bring her family meals every night. Her husband holds her hand and tells her stories about their children to keep her spirits up. Her foundation is strong." She paused, letting the comparison settle in the quiet room. "Your mother's only foundation is you, and you are cracking." I finally broke. A sob escaped my lips, a ragged, ugly sound I hadn't made since I was a boy. I hunched over, burying my face in my hands, the facade of the powerful litigator completely shattered. I wasn't Mark Davies, Esquire. I was just Eleanor's son, and I was terrified of failing her. I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was warm and firm. "That's it," Mrs. Holloway whispered. "That's the beginning. Helplessness isn't a failure, Mr. Davies. It's an admission that you can't do it alone. It's the first step to trusting others. It's the start of building a true foundation." I looked up, my face wet with tears. "Please," I begged, the words stripped of all artifice. "Please choose her." She held my gaze for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. I didn't know what she was looking for, but I prayed she found it. "The transplant team needs a support system they can rely on," she said, her voice regaining its professional tone. "They need a caregiver who will be a partner, not an adversary. Can you be that man?" I nodded frantically. "Yes, I swear it, I will be." She took out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. The entire world seemed to stop. The beeping of the monitors, the hum of the machines, the very beat of my own heart, it all faded away, leaving only the sound of my ragged breathing. Then she pressed the screen and lifted the phone to her ear. "This is Grace Holloway," she said, her voice clear and decisive. "Prep the OR. The heart is going to Eleanor Davies." Relief washed over me with such force that I felt dizzy. It was a physical wave that left me weak and trembling. But as I watched her give the orders, a new thought pierced through my elation. "What about the teacher?" I asked, my voice raspy. Mrs. Holloway finished her call and put her phone away. She looked at me, a glimmer of something new in her eyes, respect. "There are other hearts, Mr. Davies. We have an extensive network. I believe we can find a match for her soon. Tonight I made a choice based not just on need, but on hope. The hope that a son can learn that the best way to fight for his mother is to let others fight alongside him." She walked to my mother's side and adjusted her blanket, her touch infinitely gentle. "You have a long road ahead," she said, turning back to me. "Her recovery will be difficult. You will feel helpless again. But this time I want you to remember this moment, and when you feel that fear rising, instead of lashing out, I want you to come find me. My team and I are your foundation now. You have to let us be strong for you." And in that moment, looking at this incredible woman who held life and death in her hands and chose to see the potential for redemption in a broken, arrogant man, I understood. The greatest gift she had given my mother wasn't just a heart. It was a son who was finally, truly ready to help her heal.